what are the odds this is the only time he's ever said anything like this
Oh, yeah,
to a
sure.
I mean,
this is to a
please.
To a
Republican, mind
Republican,
you.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
How does he talk to Democrats? That's what I
So,
want to know.
welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, October 6th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, guys, I want to start in the state of Virginia today. There is an election coming up in under a month, and early voting has already begun. The Democratic candidate for governor is in the lead, but the Democratic nominee for attorney general is in big trouble over some texts he sent back in 2022. In a private message, Jay Jones said that the Republican Speaker of the Virginia House should get, quote, 2 bullets in the head. He then followed up with a phone conversation where he reportedly talked about the death of the Speaker's children as a way to change his political views. So here is Jones speaking to a local ABC affiliate about what he said.
I sincerely and from the bottom of my heart want to express my remorse and my regret for what happened and what I said. That language has no place in our discourse, and I am so remorseful for what happened.
I thought the fact that he said what he said, in my opinion, is disqualifying, particularly in this era of political violence. My job as Attorney General is to stop violence. I can't imagine somebody running for this job that has openly advocated and fantasized about violence against a political opponent or their children. And so I found it and find it completely troubling.
So that was Jason Miyares, his opponent, responding to it. Carl, what's going on in your state?
Well, I don't think Jay Jones finally, tried to set the record straight and said I said how sincere he was, but I don't believe he's sincere, and I'd be surprised if swing voters think he's sincere, because that 2 bullets in the head thing, yeah, that's supposed to be a joke. And the joke is you have Hitler and Pol Pot, 2 of the great mass murderers in history. And you have 2 bullets in your gun. And the joke is both bullets go to a Republican Speaker of the House who's a traditional conservative, nothing wrong with him. And then this person who he was sending the text to is a Republican, a moderate Republican lawmaker who has worked with Jones before, and she called him and said, "I'm disturbed." He doubled down and he said, "Well, you kill these people, She said, "Well, you're wishing his wife and children dead." So, well, they're raising little fascists, and it's not just a misstatement. It's an ugly way of thinking that has led us to the point where we are now. And if you see these statements, Andy and Tom, you'd think, what do these people want? A civil war? Because this is just, you wish half the country dead, and you're going to be the top law enforcement officer in Virginia. It is disqualifying, or should be. And this was a guy who was pulled over for doing like 116 miles an hour in a residential area and was given no jail time. They put Jason Worth in jail, who was a star Nats player, but this guy didn't get any jail time. He had community service, and it turned out he used the community service to work on his campaign. So he seems to be a cynical person. And not only that, Andy, I'll say, when this first came to light, that wasn't his first response. That was after the Democrats who were running on the ticket with him got to him, and that was the political consultants talking. His response when he got caught was to blame his opponent for doing a dirty trick on him. National Review broke the story. There's no evidence that his Republican opponent was even involved in this, and to attack Trump. He mentioned Trump more than he mentioned. I'd be surprised if Trump ever heard of this guy. Well, he probably has now, but so he's a cynical person, and he's full of bile and I guess hate's not too strong a word. So it's highly disturbing. The Washington Post had to write about it.
All right, stop filibustering. I want to get in on this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Tom?
Okay, Tommy, you're up.
Look, this is.
Do you disagree with what I said?
I don't disagree with anything you said.
Okay.
Look, this guy doesn't deserve to hold any elected office, any responsibility whatsoever. I don't care that he apologized. What he said in private is what he actually thinks and believes. He doubled down on it. And I think what's even more disturbing is there haven't been any, well, first of all, it was mentioned only on the Sunday shows because Mark Short, Republican, brought it up in one of the panel discussions. It was not, no stories on it. New York Times, Washington Post. This was treated as a local story. So you didn't have,
Well, the Post covered it, Tom.
I saw where they covered it, Carl. They didn't put it on the front page. They covered it in the, Maryland and Virginia section of the paper. So it was treated as if it was some sort of local story. You also had the Virginia Beach Democrats issued a statement saying that recent press may have spotlighted past mistakes. We say, let those without sin cast the first stone. Jay Jones has taken responsibility, apologized, and shown he's committed to serving with integrity and accountability. We're asking you, is calling on all Virginians to line up behind Jay Jones. It's insane. The Democrats are not only not denouncing this, they're actually standing up for this guy and trying to defend him. It is preposterous. And I think Morning Joe, to their credit, talked about it this morning, and even Joe Scarborough said, look, he should step aside. And so this has been a disaster for Democrats on a number of levels. And also, look, the media, I hate doing these thought exercises because they're so cliche, they're so rote, but they're also very true. If a Republican had done this and said this about a Democrat, it would have been a national story, a media frenzy for the past 72 hours. It would have led all the Sunday shows. It would have led the New York Times and the Washington Post on the front page. It would have been on MSNBC 24/7 nonstop. So this double standard, just it has to stop. It's one of the reasons that we're in the place that we're in, because Democrats are given a pass when they say this incredible shit. They have to be held accountable. This guy should not be running for office.
Okay, well, 6 minutes into the week, and we've got Tom's first media rant.
I'm
out of the
sorry.
way.
I sat on this all weekend, you guys, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And like, where are Abigail
Trump,
Spanberger has sort of
Tom's like Jay Jones. So Jay Jones is caught doing something wrong. Who does he blame? Trump. So Jay Jones is dropped.
Seriously, how dare you compare
Jay
me to
Jones
this guy,
is caught,
Carl? Come on.
caught out being a real jerk.
Come on.
And who does Tom blame? The media.
Are you saying the media doesn't deserve any blame for this?
I don't know.
Well,
Are you saying there's not a double standard involved, Carl?
well, first of all, kudos to National Review who reported this. Good reporting on their part.
And by the way, there's reporting that there are more texts like this that we haven't seen. And if you've read anything about this case, you probably know that that's almost 100% true.
That's what I was going to ask you guys, because I didn't know that, Tom. But what I was going to say is, what are the odds this is the only time he's ever said anything like this?
Yeah,
sure. This is to a Republican.
To a Republican, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
How does he talk to Democrats? That's what I want to know.
So Abigail Spanberger, who was the Democratic nominee for the governorship, has said that she talked to him sternly about this, but she has not yet.
She scolded him, Andy.
Scolded him, but she has not yet asked for him to step aside. Carl, how big a problem is that? Because, looking at the RCP poll, we have her up 8.3 points, but Emerson, which is the most recent poll, I think in the survey, has her up by 5 points. But the reporting that early voting is sort of trending Republican. I mean, could this be a real factor in the governor's race?
Well, she thinks it could be, which is why she has not asked him to step down. If he steps down, if he takes himself out of the race, the Republicans can be attorney general, and that she doesn't want that. She wants to govern as governor with a Democratic attorney general. These attorneys general around the country has become a very politicized office in every state in the country, and they're always lining up for or against Trump. They're always doing these lawsuits. The attorney general, the Democratic attorney general of Virginia will cooperate with the Democratic attorney general of Maryland before he'd ever cooperate with a Republican governor of Virginia. And so she has a problem on her hands, not of her own making. And I don't know if there's any way to finesse it. That's what she's trying to do.
We record this show a couple hours before it goes on air. I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone by then. I give him 24 hours at most. This is untenable. There's no way that he can stay in this race because of the damage he's doing to the Democratic Party and to Abigail Spanberger.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has called for his resignation. Governor Youngkin,
J.D. Vance,
Winston Burrell Sears. I mean, everyone, but no
except for Democrats.
Well, Trump calling for his resignation may encourage him to stay in. He's all about the opposition. That's who this guy. You got to remember the kind of person you're dealing with here. I hear you, Tom, but it strikes me as they're gonna have to really pressure him.
He could
You know,
bring the whole ticket down. Honestly,
yeah, but you know what?
this is going to be. And by the way, this is another reason that we shouldn't have early voting for
I was going to
6
say,
weeks.
isn't that that was the second thing I thought about this.
Yeah.
So, oh my God, people have
How
been
many
voting
votes
for
already
6
cast,
weeks.
and how many people would want to
Yeah.
change those votes based on the
Yeah.
new information that has just come to light?
Yeah.
I think Tom may be right. I can't imagine him lasting more than another 24 hours. We could be wrong, but I guess the more that the Republicans go after him, though, to Carl's point, maybe the more he stays firm, and the more the Democratic base rallies around him. Tom,
Possible, but also bad for the country. Bad, putting party above, like, doing what's right, putting party above country, putting party above, civility and integrity. Bad.
Yeah,
all right.
and I agree with that. But this goes way beyond incivility. This is a dangerous person. The things he says, the things he thinks. What more do we have to, a guy tried to kill Brett Kavanaugh. They killed Charlie Kirk. Meanwhile, the media keeps assuring us that most of the violence is from the right, ignoring all these stories. I'm sorry, but I think this is a pivot point, and I think it's up to the voters of Virginia to take a stand.
Gentlemen, today, Israeli and Hamas officials met in Egypt for indirect talks with the stated goal of ending the conflict in Gaza. Hamas has signaled a positive response to some aspects of President Trump's plan, but we've been here before. Still, it's a hopeful sign, and the president has asked Israel to stop its bombing campaign. Tom, all of this is happening on the eve of the second anniversary of the October 7th attack. Are you optimistic about a ceasefire and a return of the remaining hostages?
I'm trying to be optimistic, but it sort of flies in the face of evidence. Look, Trump has been pretty aggressive on this, and Marco Rubio was on the Sunday shows of a weekend saying, "Look, this has to happen fast. We don't want to be sitting here 3 weeks from now working out the logistics of how these hostages are going to get released. Like, that has to be done in the next day, 2 days, 3 days." And Trump has, there was reporting over the weekend that he had, cursed at Bibi Netanyahu, saying he was, using the F-bomb with him, saying he was too pessimistic about this stuff and he needed to, like, get on board with really investing in these peace talks. And obviously, Trump said also to Hamas, "Look, this is your last chance. And if you don't accept these terms, if you don't release these hostages immediately, you're going to face complete obliteration." And I think Hamas knows that Trump is not messing around. I think that's actually what he thinks would happen. So in that sense, we seem to have a bit of momentum here that we haven't had before. And so in that sense, I am optimistic. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, we're dealing with Hamas, and they've broken every promise, every ceasefire, every agreement that they've ever had over the last 10, 20 years. I will say there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal, which we ran on Real Clear Politics today, by a reporter who had said that Gazans themselves, he was in Gaza and interviewing Palestinians. They said, and the subhead was, "Weary Palestinians say President Trump's peace plan isn't perfect, but a halt to the fighting is more important." And so the people of Gaza apparently are pushing and invested in this peace process, and that may be the most hopeful sign of all.
Carl, Trump did say all bets will be off if Hamas doesn't move quickly. Is that sufficient incentive for them to sort of change their tune on this, do you think? Or
Well, I don't know what he means by that. I've been curious about this all along. Face obliteration. What's he saying? United States going to send troops there? Israel is doing everything they can to get rid of Hamas. They haven't been able to do it, and they're going to be worn out soon. I hope Trump's not running a bluff here, because that peace plan had 20 points to it, but the important things are giving back the hostages immediately. They would get in return 250 terrorists who've killed Israelis who are serving life in Israeli jails, but they have to lay down their arms, and basically they get immunity from past crimes, but only from the past. And so there's these incentives to do it, but Hamas just may be a death cult that's incapable of making peace. I'd like to be wrong about that.
Well, meanwhile, Tom, Greta Thunberg,
Thunberg.
Thunberg, Greta
I
Thunberg.
think that's how she pronounces it.
Yeah,
Thunberg.
she has been deported from Israel today. She arrived in Greece along with 160 others. She had been held for
See the
about a
video of her
week.
walking through the airport,
Yeah,
fist
fist
up,
up.
getting
Yeah.
cheered wildly like a rock
Yes.
star.
She did say she was mistreated in prison, but she wasn't going to talk about that now because she didn't want to sort of deflect from the story. But what do you make of Greta's return to the West?
I thought I thought we were all burning up because of the climate. Like, what happened? What happened to the climate crisis? Apparently, it's not as urgent as the Palestinian cause. I don't understand. Look, she's an easy target to make fun of because she's this, young, I think, terribly naive
Imbecile.
person who yeah, who is treated in the media as if she's some sort of, some sort of deity or rock star or something. I mean, she's given this unbelievable press coverage and has been for 10 years now. I mean, it's very bizarre. Because she doesn't really know anything. She hasn't really done anything. And yet she's, was the face of climate change until she decided, oh, I'm going to put on a keffiyeh and, head over to, hop on a boat and get on a flotilla to Gaza. I mean, it's been remarkable how quickly she's shed one, crisis for another.
Well, I'm less amused by her than Tom. I think she's a sinister little twit. Uh, I mean, she cares. She was mistreated in Israeli jail. What was she there? 24 hours. These hostages have been there for 2 years. These people, these non-combatants that Hamas stole, kidnapped from their families, shot their loved
Starved.
ones, and they're starving. And if she was actually a humanitarian, she would be drawing attention to that. She's just an unserious person, and I don't think we should even talk about her anymore on this show.
All right. Well, there were some Americans in the flotilla as well. There's about
Everything I
four
said about them,
Californians.
her goes to them too.
Okay.
Add them to that list, Andy.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break because Carl won't talk to me about Greta
We
Thunberg.
got we got nothing else for this segment. Carl's just shut it down.
Shut it
Mr.
down.
Free Speech.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will not invoke my First Amendment rights here. I'll take the host prerogative and I will end this segment right now. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm with Tom and Carl, and we will be back right after this. Guys, I want to talk about Des Moines. This is a strange story. The city's school superintendent has been taken into custody by ICE last month on a fugitive warrant. The warrant says he was an illegal alien from Guyana. ICE agents searched his car, found a fully loaded Glock 9mm pistol hidden there under the seat, along with $3,000 in cash, found more guns in his house. And it turns out that this guy has a rap sheet that includes a narcotics charge with intent to sell in New York, firearms possession in Pennsylvania. He was illegally registered to vote in Maryland. So, Tom, this guy nonetheless has had a pretty great career as a school administrator until recently. What is going on?
You cannot make this stuff up. I'm surprised we actually haven't talked about this story yet. There's just been so much going on in this because this story is already, I don't know, 7 days old or something. This happened early last week, where ICE, arrested him. And the school board, and I think one of the school board members is like a former, Obama administration senior official, and or Michelle Obama. I mean, it's, and these folks were so proud of this guy when he was the superintendent because he sort of checked all the boxes. He had his bow tie, was very dapper dressed. African-American gentleman and presented himself. I mean, this is one of those.
Actually, not African American. Turns out he's not an American.
He's actually African.
He's black.
Yeah. But, you come across these stories from time to time of people who have, I don't know, people who are 24 years old who are posing as, a freshman in high school and playing sports or something. I mean, every now and then there's a story like this where people have totally recast themselves. But rarely do you see it in a situation where they're in a position of authority and manage to somehow work their way through whatever um, guides are supposed to be there and prevent people from like this from getting there. I mean, he filled out his application, he did his interviews. None
Yeah,
of this
but they
stuff
didn't,
was ever uncovered. I mean, it was just
but
it's
they didn't
crazy how he wasn't caught before this.
they didn't vet him. He didn't go to these schools. He said he's a con man. He doesn't have these degrees he said he has. He didn't go to these schools. All they had to do is make a phone call. I think look, Trump and JD Vance, the whole Republican project has gone way overboard attacking affirmative action and DEI. They've kind of they sound crazy about it sometimes. And then a case like this comes up and you realize this is an example of what they're talking about. This guy was picked because of his skin color, not his academic credentials, because he didn't have academic credentials. And the school board, if he hadn't been arrested, he'd still be, if ICE hadn't picked him up, he'd still be there. He'd still be in charge.
Yeah. So he's making about $305,000 a year.
So why
Yeah,
didn't he cash this? Okay.
30,000 students. He was in control of 5,000 employees. I mean, I will say, I mean, I'm sure he's a scam artist, but he must have had some chops in order to sort of keep succeeding up like this. He also, Tom, in 2000, he represented Guyana at the Summer Olympics.
What sport?
800 meters relay race. Or maybe it was, no, the 800 meters race. It wasn't a relay race. Okay. He didn't make it past the first round, but nonetheless, I mean, he did that for real. So, I mean,
but Carl's right. Like how, it makes you wonder how many of these people who are in various positions aren't vetted. Like, do people pick up the phone? Do they check references? Do they do Google searches? I mean, you hear all these stories about employers that, like, when they're hiring young kids, they go look at their social media feeds and they sort of dig around and make sure they're not, crazy or whatever. The fact they wouldn't do that for a person that they were putting in charge of 5,000 employees, and they just took basically on his word that he had all these credentials. It's crazy.
There was a search firm.
Right.
And they were asked and they pointed to a sub search firm. Somebody they had, nobody wants to take the blame. And the school board said, well, we just believe what the search board said. But the idea that you give the top job and never make a single phone call, never check out the credentials, that's kind of malpractice.
They're suing the search firm apparently.
Ah, yeah.
I mean,
but here's the other interesting thing about this story. There have been protests about this, saying that 200 people showed up at a recent protest. According to this in the New York Times, so I believe it. Protesting.
We like the guy anyway.
We like the guy anyway, and keep ICE out of our schools. And these placards were just hysterical. But
That's awesome.
as I say, he must have had some charisma or something.
Well, most con men do, Andy, right?
I guess that's part of it. Yeah. The guns are kind of interesting too, though.
Little worrisome there.
Because he talked about, he was a deer
driving
hunter.
around with a loaded Glock in your car. Yeah.
And he said, I don't look like your typical deer hunter, but I like to go hunt deer. Not with a
handgun?
Not with a 9mm Glock, fully loaded under the seat of your car with $3,000.
You never know when you'll see a deer in Iowa.
I guess that must be true.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Silliness.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Richard Porter is going to be here. We're going to talk about what maybe some people think should have been the lead story for the day, I imagine. So we are going to talk about it. It's what's going on in Chicago. It's what's going on in Portland. And we'll be back with Richard Porter on that right after this. We are joined in this segment by Richard Porter, former national committeeman to the RNC from Illinois and a regular contributor to RCP and a regular guest on the show. So, Richard, welcome to the program.
It's good to be here, guys.
So, there's a lot going on. I'm going to try to recap some of it quickly. You guys can fill in the holes, but a federal judge on Sunday night blocked the Trump administration from deploying any out-of-state National Guard troops to the state of Oregon. State of Illinois and the city of Chicago have both sued to block what Governor Pritzker calls a, quote, Trump invasion of the city. And Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order today that says that city property, including parking lots, cannot be used as staging grounds for raids by ICE agents. Carolyn Levitt said this about all of this today at the White House briefing. She said, quote, the president has the right to call up the National Guard in cases where he deems it appropriate. And she went on to say, we're confident in the president's legal authority to do this, and we're very confident we will win on the merits of the law. Richard, let's start with the law. We have this lawsuit. We have executive orders. Who knows what else? Which of these has the best chance of stopping Trump, or is he right that the administration will eventually prevail?
You should probably point out, Andy, that while we talk about the law in this program, none of us are lawyers. Richard actually is a lawyer and has been a lawyer for like 4 decades, so he knows what he's talking about.
Right. So that's why we're glad to have him on for this segment. So, Richard, what do you say?
Well, look, I mean, I think that it depends on the facts and circumstances on the ground. And what that is in Chicago is the Chicago Police Department is refusing to, at the directive of the mayor, refusing to protect federal agents and federal property. And over the course of the weekend, we saw what I think are fairly called riots. They weren't peaceful protests. It was people throwing rocks, bricks, destroying a property, hitting cars, obstructing cars. We actually had a situation where agents were boxed in by 10 cars, and they refused. The CPD refused to respond. And there's now evidence that they were commanded not to respond. At the head of the watch was doing that, and I think it's believed that the order came from City Hall. If the local police will not protect the personnel and property of the federal government, the president, of course, is going to have the right to bring in additional forces, including National Guard, in order to protect those personnel and that property. I mean, it's not a hard thing to see. And, there are some district judges. There are 677 district judges out there. And among those, you're going to find many who are very virulently anti-Trump. Not a surprise. There have been dozens of district court injunctions and dozens overturned by appellate courts. So look, the Trump administration is working through the court system, getting the authorization it needs when they're being sued. But I think we have to recognize that what's going on in Chicago is very weird and very, very odd. We had the mayor today basically saying that city properties were off limits to federal agents. So what are they going to do? Are they going to say it's trespass if a federal agent goes into a parking lot? Are they going to send the Chicago police to arrest the federal officer for trespass? And they're discussing the activities of the federal government in terms of the ICE agents and the Border Patrol as a quote unquote invasion, as if Illinois isn't part of the United States. It's nuts. We haven't seen anything like this since the 60s, when the southern states were resisting the 50s and 60s, were the federal government's directions with regard to Civil Rights Act, or back to the 1860s, when we had the same thing, of course, which led to a civil war, or the 1830s, when South Carolina stood up to Andrew Jackson, or the Whiskey Rebellion that George Washington had put down, and when people in Pennsylvania refused to work with the federal government. So, I mean, look, this is kind of crazy, and Pritzker's amping this thing up for his own purposes in a way that's going to get dangerous.
Is the supremacy clause in play? I mean, is this even constitutional? Can Brandon Johnson even do what he did today? I mean, is it or is this just all kind of political theater that is blatantly unconstitutional?
Look, it's all theater. It is all theater. As a practical matter, in order to make an order that someone can't be trespassing, you've got to be able to back it up with the power to arrest the person and remove them if they're trespassing. And think about that. What does that mean? Are they going to have the Chicago police if ICE is gathering together a SWAT team to go hit another building where it's been taken over by a Latin American gang, a drug cartel? Are they going to have the CPD surround them with their own SWAT team and then try to arrest them? This is nuts. the idea that you have elected officials who are sworn to uphold the Constitution, trying to do things to obstruct the federal government's enforcement of valid federal laws is like a step too far. I mean, they really are taking the whole sanctuary city thing to an extreme, which is highlighting really the unconstitutional illegality of the whole idea.
They made up these signs too, because I think if you have a private parking lot and you want to be covered by this, they have these really cool looking, they're official looking signs. I'll give them that much, which I guess you can put up and say, that ICE can't use your parking lot either. I mean, can they do that?
Yeah, I think that's different. I mean, I think, under the Constitution, the federal government is entitled to take over private property. And the city of Chicago does have the same rights as a private citizen, but there's a practical limitation on that, which is what are you going to do about it? Now, a private landowner whose property is taken has a takings lawsuit against the government for the invasion of their property. If someone comes in, you can have a civil rights action against them for what they did. But you're not going to have the Chicago police come and arrest federal agents. That just isn't happening.
Carl Cannon, Richard mentioned the 1960s, 1860s. You're a student of history. Is this insurrection-y? What's going on here? Is this like,
Well, yeah,
bordering on hot civil war or what?
well, I'll use a phrase Democrats like to use. This is settled law. The federal government has primacy. But Richard said something that I've been thinking about, which is these sanctuary cities. I think the first one was Berkeley, California. And pretty soon, there's a couple of hundred of them, and then there's sanctuary states. What happened in that case, the rationale in California, which was the vanguard of this, was that they didn't want local police officers serving as immigration officers. And the rationale behind it long before Donald Trump's on the scene, this had nothing to do with him, was that in these communities, the police had forged delicate relationships with, let's say the Mexican American community in Los Angeles, because that's originally what we were talking about. And they wanted people to be able to report crime without fear of being deported. There was a whole rationale for it, and it was a balancing act. And when asked about it, you can't violate federal law. They'd say, no, we're prioritizing our local resources. What we're saying is we've decided not to use city resources to do this function. But it turned out to be a slippery slope. Now, fast forward 25 years later, Pritzker and Brandon Johnson, they're like, George Wallace in the Schoolhouse Door. They're like this. They would not get this. They would be baffled by this. But they're the Southern segregationists. They're basically saying federal law doesn't apply to us, and we're going way beyond any idea of sanctuary city with, trying to look out for the Mexican American community and protect victims of crime. We're just thumbing our nose at federal law because we don't like who the president is, and we have different ideas about immigration. But telling federal agents that they can't use city property, I think that's problematic. Richard can correct me. I don't think that's a lawful order. I think federal government needs to use government property. They say, here's an emergency situation. We're going to use it for this time. And putting yourself in opposition to the federal government, Richard's right. That we've seen that before.
Okay, but Richard, back to you. Like, let's say you are Pritzker or you are Brandon Johnson. You're a progressive Democrat. Like, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to just lay down and let the, cooperate. You're supposed to. I mean, they would obviously that would infuriate their base. I mean, how should they handle this politically?
Well, I know, but that's the problem, which is I think people have lost sight of the fact that we're a union. We're the United States of America. And when there's a Republican president, he's president of the entire territory that is comprised of the United States of America. He's not just president of the red states, and the blue states get to say, you're not welcome here. And we had Pritzker on a press conference this afternoon saying ICE is not welcome here. Well, yeah, they are. I mean, that's part of the United States. And that's why I think where they've sort of gone a bridge too far. It's one thing.
Wait, Richard, let me ask you something about that.
Yeah.
So Florida doesn't have a state income tax. What if the state of Florida said, the Internal Revenue Service is not welcome in Florida. We don't like we're paying too much taxes. They have to get out of Florida. Everybody would see how absurd that is, right?
Right.
Is this any different?
No. And the reality is the federal government always has its priorities, and they use various levers to try to get the states to work with them. It's Democratic presidents, Republican presidents. For as long as the Republic has existed, once we've had a unitary executive, we had one president for the entire United States, whatever number of states it was at that time. And now we have 50 states. And the idea that Illinois is exempt because gosh, we don't like the immigration policy of the duly elected president by a majority of citizens and by the, a supermajority of electoral votes, that somehow Illinois gets to say, yeah, we're not going to let you enforce law here. We're not going to do that.
Well,
And what's nutty about this is if they did cooperate, there'd be a lot less conflict. So what you have is a situation where, the local officials, J.B. Pritzker wants to be the leader of the extreme wing of the Democratic Party, which is sort of what drives the primary process for president. And so he is looking for this conflict. He's trying to go like one step short of insurrection. He started his press conference by saying there is no insurrection. And then he went on to talk about all the ways that ICE isn't welcome and you can't enforce federal law here and blah, blah, blah. So you're sort of like, dude, I mean, how does this all add up?
yeah, but Richard, just to devil's advocate for a second here, when I hear you, like it's a union and all that stuff, and that's great. But when the president gets in front of the generals last week and says, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going to Chicago very soon. That sounds to me like the president's using rhetoric that sounds like he's invading a foreign country. That can't be helpful.
Donald Trump has always had this kind of aggressive rhetoric. That's sort of who he is. It stirs up the other side. And I think JB wants to establish that he will just come as hard as Trump does. And so that's what's kind of creating this situation. I mean, the reality is going hard after criminals is not a bad thing. Let's look at the example in Washington, D.C. It's not like there are a loss of freedoms in Washington, D.C. DC is not an authoritarian location within the United States. What you have is a lot less crime in Washington, D.C. now than you did 3 months ago because they've done a surge, not just of the National Guard, but off of FBI and DEA. If the local officials would work with the federal government, we would have less crime in Chicago. There would be fewer murders, fewer carjackings. The evidence is in. It's happening in Memphis with cooperation with a Republican governor. In Portland and in Chicago, because they have local Democrats, they're refusing to do anything with the federal government, which is just kind of crazy.
Well,
Why
Richard,
isn't having less crime a good thing in Chicago? It's not
well,
going to
there's a
authoritarian state.
Democratic mayor here in Washington, and Washington's an even more Democratic city than Chicago. And Muriel Bowser, she decided to, cooperate, not because she necessarily approved of what the president was doing, but for the reasons you said. She tried to make the best of a situation that she didn't think was ideal. She didn't badmouth Trump. My guess is, got the federal government to say privately, we will be going after criminals, not just illegals. And to your point, it worked in Washington partly because the local Democrats decided to not just dig in and stand as the resistance.
We're talking about crime here. We're talking about immigration enforcement. It seems problematic to me the degree to which we allied those two topics together. Because if you look at what happened in Washington, I think about 40% of the arrests have been immigration arrests. If you look at when they're talking about Portland, they're really talking about trying to defend these ICE facilities from Antifa or protesters, depending on mostly peaceful.
Mostly
peaceful
arsonists.
Yeah, arsonists. But you get my point.
Exactly.
My point is that, I mean, and Tom, I'd like your view on this too. Like politically, I think when you talk to people about crime, you get one reaction. When you talk to them about enforcing immigration law, you get sort of a different reaction, don't you?
What I would say is, look, I think it's really kind of the same thing because a lot of the people that they're picking up, not everybody, but a large, focus is on the criminal element within the illegal alien community. So, there was this very highly publicized raid on a building that Trende Agra had taken over, and they arrested, I don't know, it was a dozen people or something in there that were known gang members, and some of them were wanted for crimes. So, they talk about this as being, oh, they used a Black Hawk helicopter and these other things. Well, guess what? When the CPD gets serious about stuff, they have a SWAT team and they look like the same guys. It's the same technique. It's not like there's anything different. And so when you're arresting, cartel members in Chicago, you're also reducing crime. Now, there's also an opportunity in all the other neighborhoods of Chicago that are not perhaps, the hotbed for the criminal illegal aliens. There's an opportunity to reduce crime there as well. It's what happened in DC, and it's what's happening in Memphis right now. And why not use the federal resources to reduce murders? Doesn't every life count? Why is it that we just let 55 shootings over the course of a weekend in the south and west sides of Chicago go by as if that's okay? Why don't we get that down to 15 or 10 or maybe even 0, heaven forbid? That's a lot of lives saved, and we can do it by working together. The truth is, Chicago worked with Obama when he was in office to do this sort of thing. Obama had more deportations than Trump did. And so this is not like this is some terrible new thing. It's just that it happens to be Trump, and the political necessity for Pritzker of trying to establish himself as a vanguard for the kind of hard left wing of the Democratic Party is what's creating this crisis.
Andy, I do think, you make a good point that the polling certainly shows that people are more in favor. If you say, are you going after, people who are here illegal, who have committed crime, particularly violent crime, much more supportive of efforts to get those people out of the country than people who just crossed here illegally and have a clean record otherwise. And, to the extent that the administration could do a better job of articulating that. And I think, part of the problem, though, is I think the media reportage oftentimes isn't, and I see Tom Homan, I see Kristi Noem, I see, the government they'll get a report of it's like the Maryland man. It's like, well, hold on. This person was arrested because they did this, and this. So sometimes I think the media is at play. And quite frankly, the Democrats are doing the exact same thing for their own purposes. I mean, J.B. Pritzker just stood there and said, oh, they're snatching people off the streets and zip tying little children, which is not true. I mean, these are lies. These are not, they're making it sound like the ICE is only here to terrorize, the immigrant communities and even U.S. citizens, right? And there's no reason J.B. Pritzker could not and should not stand there and say, you know what? We want to get rid of violent criminals too, and we're willing to cooperate with the federal government to do that. But to the extent they go any further than that, or they overstep their bounds, we're gonna, that's a bright line for us, and we're not crossing that line, and we will push back against that. But they're not even saying that. They won't even go that far. They're just saying everybody's here. We have to protect everybody, even if they're gang members and cartel members or whatever, against these Gestapo, Nazi tactics and administration. And so they are also eliding the difference between the two. And so we're kind of talking past each other, and it's set up as this, you're either in favor of drug cartels or you're in favor of the invasion of the cities. We've dumbed down our politics. We've dumbed down this issue to not solve the problem, but to make the problem even worse.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, guys, this has been great. We're going to have to leave it there. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I've had Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan with me, and Richard Porter, frequent contributor to RCP, and he has a piece on the front page of Real Clear Politics today. I commend it to you. That's our program for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good evening. See you then.